Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Between Sessions with Berries. We have a very interesting guest today. I'm excited to introduce you all to Dr. Urmi Jani. I hope I said it right. I'm going to have her correct me in a minute. You guys know how I am with names. Clinical health and performance psychologist who blends science, empathy, and strategy to help individuals achieve optimal well-being. With a background that includes directing psychology services at a specialty heart hospital and training at prestigious institutions like PCOM and Friends Hospital. She brings a rich mix of clinical experience and high-performance insight. She now works at Chalet Performance and offers concierge-style psychology care that integrates mind-body wellness with a focus on helping professionals thrive. You'll hear her perspective on job satisfaction, work-life balance, and how clinicians can support themselves while supporting each other. Thank you so much for being here. Now, please say your name correctly in case I butchered it.
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm really excited to be here.
You're welcome.
You can just, I go by Dr. Jani.
Dr. Jani, that makes it easy.
Yeah, pretty easy.
Well, thanks for being here. I'd love to just dive in, hear a little bit about your background and performance psychology. Just maybe we could dive into that and what that is, because a lot of the listeners on this podcast are maybe newer in practice, or maybe they're trying to still find their niche, that sort of thing. So I think it's a super interesting niche that we don't hear a lot about. So I'd love to just start there and dive into that. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I stumbled upon the practice that I'm at now, Chalet Performance Psychiatry, over about a year and a half ago at this point, and I emailed Dr. Chalet and was like, hey, I want to be part of you, and we met and got along great, and I've been there ever since. Prior to that, I was the director of psychology at a heart hospital where I oversaw a lot of their services. But so performance psychiatry, it is a subspecialty, and it's really interesting. It focuses on optimizing sort of mental health, cognitive functioning, emotional resilience, and individuals who operate in like very high performance environments, right?
Okay.
And so our patient population at our practice, we see a lot of athletes. We see, performing artists, executives, entrepreneurs, a lot of C-suite individuals, also medical professionals and students in, some more elite academic settings, just people who are high performers at sort of the top of their game, but needing a little bit more, whether it's stress management, just work-life optimization, things like that.
Nice. So before we dig into all that, you said something I thought was really interesting. It sounds like you found this place and this person that seemed like a really interesting mentor for you, and you really wanted to work with them. So did you just decide like, hey, I don't even know they're hiring. I'm just going to reach out and see if I can work with her. Yeah, because I love that initiative.
I 100% cold called. I found her on LinkedIn, sent her a message. I found her on Facebook, like her professional page, sent her a message, and the rest is history. She emailed me back within 48 hours, and we had a conversation and just got along really well.
That's amazing. I love that initiative. So were you already in that performance psychology area, or was it I just love this, I think it's so interesting, and I'm just going to I'm going to do this?
My family, we've moved around quite a bit across the country. My husband's in medicine, and so I've been around these high performers my whole life. We've been together over 20 years. And so where we were living last, he was working at a hospital, and I took over as their director of psychology for the hospital. And I'd worked there for about 7 years, and we decided to move to Scottsdale, Arizona, which is where we live now. And, I kept my job actually remotely. I kept my job as their director for about 3 years after we moved. And it kind of just got to a point where I was like, I want to be here now. I want to be back in person. I would like to be, networking amongst peers. My job, everything was just feeling like it was too much of an online platform. And while I still see patients through telemed, I am licensed in over 40 states through PsyPact. I still love my teletherapy practice. I still love the option of being able to, network and be in a psychiatry practice where I get to work with other like-minded people and jump into their office if I'm like, hey, this person was saying this about their meds. Can you help me figure that out or something like that? So I was looking around at practices and seeing like, okay, if it's time for a change, what would that look like? And I saw this practice and I just had stars in my eyes for it.
Amazing. And you already had that like personal experience with the high performers, so you probably understood that population pretty well, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
really
And I said,
cool.
this seems like a really natural fit and sort of a next, I'd been at the other place for 7 years. And I was like, okay, I think that this is a great transition now.
I love that. Just you liked it, so you cold called and you got it. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
I'm risk averse in a lot of ways, but not when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, for somebody listening that maybe is not familiar with the population of high performers, what are some of the major pain points? You mentioned like stress management, that sort of thing. What are some of like the niche characteristics that you would be specializing in or treating if somebody wanted to get into this type of work?
Yeah. So, I classically trained as a cognitive behavioral therapist, a psychologist, right? The school that I went to was down the street from the Beck Institute, and so it was just, that was all we ate, slept, and, drank when we were there. So really cognition for high performers plays a huge role. So enhancing their focus, memory, attention, decision making, right? They're having to make these like quick decisions at all points. They're having to juggle, and that leads me to sort of psychological flexibility as well, like having to build resilience, coping strategies, all sorts of stuff for them. Stress management's a big one. They're balancing a lot. They're humans just like the rest of us. And so they go through relationship dips, issues with kids, issues with, coworkers, managing things. I work with CEOs who are like, yeah, I just had to fire my crew and I have to hire a whole new one. How do we manage that? Burnout, right? Chronic stress, things like that. Also, sleep optimization. A lot of these high performers don't sleep very well or very much. So, helping with a lot of that kind of stuff as well.
That's very interesting. So you work in conjunction with the psychiatrist. So the psychiatrist is right there, so you could just knock on the door and say, look, so-and-so's not sleeping. We've tried this, this, and this. Now, what do you recommend? So you guys are like sort of handing it back and forth to each other, I would guess, in the practice?
Yeah. And, I think that's what makes our practice so special is that we have 4 psychiatrists on staff and they each have their niches, right? So we've got one who is sleep fellowship trained. We have one who works primarily with ADHD in women. We have people who work with adolescents, right? So everyone has their sort of niche. And so if something comes up, I'm like, oh, I know exactly who to talk to if they do need like that pharmacological support. And vice versa, there's a couple of psychologists at our practice as well, and we all have our niche as well. And so if sometimes medication is helpful, but they need something else, coping skills, whatnot, to just augment whatever they're taking pharmacologically. So then they'll walk them right over to our office and say, hey, can you see this person for XYZ? And then we're happy to jump in and help.
Nice. That's amazing. So I'd love to dive into like the concierge type model because, we hear that a lot. There's a lot of different ways to do private practice, really.
Very true.
Can we talk about this model and how it works? And I'm also super curious about like, since it's psychiatrists and psychologists that are PsyPac, are you guys able to see people across the country through this practice? Is it all Arizona based? I just would love to dig into all those details.
Yeah. So our practice actually has a couple of locations. We've got a location, our primary one is Scottsdale, but we also have a Beverly Hills location.
Nice.
And so we have a psychiatrist who works there as well, and he's on the ground there. And also, concierge it was new to me too when I joined. So performance psychology as well as concierge, but it's actually been really interesting and a great learning process. And I don't know that I would do it a different way now that I've been here. And I've been at different group practices before where that wasn't the case. But it's sort of a more boutique style approach to services where essentially our patients get priority access to us.
Nice.
So they have our cell phone numbers. They can call us, they can text us between sessions, which is really nice. Some of them do just to let us know that they need to cancel or reschedule. Again, with high performers, their schedules are constantly changing. So sometimes we have to sort of meet them where they're at. And some of them will text us and say, oh my gosh, I'm about to walk into this board meeting and I'm having a panic attack. Give me some coping skills. And so we will get on the phone with them and give them like 10 or 15 minutes of our time and just kind of say, okay, let's go through this, this, and this. What I also really like about it on the provider end of it, there is boundaries and there is balance. So I think that when I say that, people are like, oh my gosh, what do you mean people have your cell phone?
That was my first thought. It's like, tell me, are they calling in the middle of the night? Like, are somebody on call each week? Or like, how does that even work?
Yeah, so actually we're not on call, and we let people know that immediately. Like if there's ever an emergency, each individual has their own sort of philosophy, and our group allows us to kind of figure out how we want to handle that for our own selves. I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids, and just I'm the point person for them. And so, I let my patients know all the time that if I'm with my family or if I'm with other patients even, like I can't always pick up the phone, right? So I'm never on call. So if there is a situation where it's an emergency, you have to get contact with somebody right away. Obviously, reach out to local emergency people who can help. But I try to do my best to get back to people within like a couple hours. If it's the middle of the night, I'll try to wait till 7, 8 a.m. to get back to you if I can. And so we do, I really think that is so important for boundaries. And with that too, I picked up phone calls at soccer games. I've been at my kids' soccer games and I've had to field phone calls and say, hey, what's been going on? Okay, have you tried this, this, and this? Okay, let's do this, this, and this. And then like call me back in an hour and let me know how that goes for you, which is really nice. Cool. Our patients also within this concierge structure, a lot of concierge practices, I know it's a hot topic right now, especially in Scottsdale, especially in where we are. They have sort of monthly or annual retainers. We don't have that in psychiatry because I think ethically it's hard to tie somebody down to like a monthly subscription, especially if there's if we're not having a good rapport or if something happens and the patient doesn't feel comfortable coming back to us or talking to us about something. And so in that case, we don't have that. It's just pay as you go sort of thing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. We will charge about 30 minutes prior to a session. So we do ensure that we do get paid. And we do have, a pretty good cancellation policy. So 48 hours, unless there's like a big emergency, and then we can sort of waive that on a 1 or 2 time basis. But yeah, that priority access, it also, the concierge model also allows us to give our patients extended sessions, text or email support, house calls. So we've been known to do house calls as well in our practice if that's what the patient needs. Dr. Choulet has gone to, so she actually used to be a team psychiatrist for our local NBA team and WNBA team.
Okay.
And that's how she kind of got into this performance-based practice. And so she's been known to go to basketball courts and meet, people there where they're at. And that's so cool. We offer that as well.
That's really, really interesting. I'm sure people listening are like, grad school, we aren't allowed to do that. We have to take insurance. We have to follow that 50-minute hour. We have to do, no calls after 6, all of those really strict boundaries. So I love hearing like outside of the box thinking on this stuff and how other people are managing it. It's really, really cool. I would imagine people are listening are like, how much does it cost?
For an initial consult, an initial evaluation for an adult, I also work with teenagers, but for an adult, I charge $300 for an initial 50-minute session. And then that's just like, that's a 60-minute initial intake eval. So just getting to know them. And then if we decide to work together following that, then it's $250 per session.
That's super reasonable.
And so where the concierge part of it kind of comes into play, if people are texting me between sessions, if we are doing house calls, that is a little bit more. But for the text and email support between sessions, for every 5 minutes of time, it's sort of prorated to that $250 rate.
Okay.
And so for 5 minutes, for $250, it'd be $25 of clinical time.
Nice.
Now, patients are texting me because they can't have to cancel or reschedule. I'm not charging them for that. But, I've had people calling me saying, hey, I need these coping skills. Can you talk me through this situation that just happened? So I would charge $25 for each 5 minutes of my time.
Oh, okay. That's great. So that's written already into the contract. They know they text you, they're paying $25 for this response. Or if you pick up the phone, there's like that flat fee for the percentage of minutes that you go with them. Wow.
Yeah, that's all written into our consents, our contracts, everything. So none of this is a surprise to our patients. And also, like in the initial intake, we will go over what the concierge model means to our practice and what it means for our patients. So we'll go over all of that. So sometimes people forget, but oftentimes, they're aware that that's our policy.
That's really cool. I think a lot of people would love that flexibility. So will you all do sort of intensive sessions, or do you try to keep it to like an hour session or a 90-minute, or is there a standard length of time with the concierge versus, your typical like insurance-based practice that's like 53 minutes kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we like to meet the patients where they're at, right? So
Okay,
I've had
yeah.
patients who will say, "Hey, I'm going through this like major situation. I've got like I really need all this stuff figured out." And so then I have scheduled 90-minute or even 120-minute sessions, again, just prorated from that 250. But then there's people who will say, like, I just want to come in every week and just talk about what's been going on and just kind of process some life events that have happened. And so a typical session for me is 50 minutes for that 250 mark.
Nice. And what type of caseload do you carry with this generally? Like how many people would you say you probably see a week based with this model?
Yeah. So for me, again, busy mom, I work school hours
Yeah.
because of I like to joke that, from my 8 to 5, my 8 to 3 job, and then my 3 to 9 job, I'm,
Yeah.
my kids' chauffeur and Uber driver for all their activities. But so for me, I'm really happy at about like 12 patients a week.
Nice. Oh, that sounds amazing. How often do you get a call after hours, or how many like overnight phone calls do you think you're getting? Is it not very often, or?
It's actually not often. People like to know that they have that in their pocket, but most people don't really use it,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Gotcha.
And again, it just depends on what the person's going through at the time. Like, I've had students, like more college age kids who are going through harder times or transitions or adjustment issues with friends. And then they're like, oh, I had a panic attack. I really need help. And my mom's not picking up the call. So let me call you.
Aw.
But when it comes to adults and, people who are professionals, they generally tend to understand that you are a person as well. You have your own life as well. And like, they're really not going to bother you unless they really absolutely need it. And even then, I have a lot of my patients, they're just really respectful, and they'll send me a text first and say, Dr. Jani, I know it's like Friday night. I'm really sorry to bother you if you're like out doing something, but I just need like 5 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
Do you think you can call me? And then they will always I don't know, my patients are great. I really enjoy them.
No, I love it. I mean, I've taken many calls like that just myself, and I never charge for them. So I like hearing that there's a model
Yeah.
that you can do that with. And I'm guessing there's no insurance involved, right? Probably in this type of
Yeah,
practice.
we are a self-pay practice. We are a
Okay.
self-pay practice. We do provide super bills for all of our patients, and work with places like Reimbursify and those sorts of to help get patients be able to submit it to their insurance and get reimbursement. But we are self-pay.
That's great. Yeah. And this might be totally out of your wheelhouse. I don't know. But like marketing a practice like this, how would somebody get into this? Because somebody might be listening. They're like, I love that. I don't want to have these strict boundaries. I want to be available and charge for packages. And so how do you, not packages, but like extra calls or whatever, like tacking these extra services on? How would somebody go about marketing this if this is even your department?
Yeah, Dr. Choulet, I can only speak to what I've observed her doing.
Yeah.
She's remarkable.
Okay.
She's incredibly remarkable. She has built relationships with a lot of local marketing gurus, I would say, local magazines that
nice.
are native to like Phoenix, Scottsdale, things like that, where she will just kind of, I'm not sure exactly how she goes about doing it, but she'll get features for not only our practice, but other medical professionals in the area. She started a couple of networking groups for physicians, attorneys, things like that. She's a board certified psychiatrist.
Oh, nice.
And so she started like networking groups where she'll just start networking with professionals and say, hey, I think that part of it is the biggest, is the biggest sort of like way that we attract our patients. We've partnered with a couple of major internal medicine groups, and we'll say, hey, so if your patients ever need mental health or anything like that, and some of these, again, like I mentioned, Concierge is taking off here where we are living, and so a lot of these patients are solo practitioners, or they have just these practices where they are looking to outsource some of this other these other services.
Yeah, the mental health and the psychiatry. I think it's so great to have both there together like that, because a lot of times solo practitioners, we're having to find a psychiatrist to refer to, and the communication is tough. So I think that's a really cool model. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, are you going to say something?
Yeah, and so I think just so with the marketing, I think a lot of it has just been like word of mouth. It's been a lot of like our psychiatrists getting out there and saying, hey, we have psychologists too, we have therapists, we have other people who are really skilled. And so if your patients are having trouble with sleep and you don't want to prescribe, send it to us and we'll help them. And so that's been really nice, meeting a lot of these medical professionals in that avenue.
That's really cool. And I imagine if you've got a lot of high performing elite type people that it's word of mouth, I would think like,
Yeah.
who do you go to for therapy? And they're like, well,
Yeah.
we go to this really,
If you know, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
but our presence online, all of that is Dr. Chalet has done a great job of doing all of that.
So cool. I love that. Now,
Yeah.
we always in this podcast talk a little bit about like technology or AI, if there's any of that you're using in your life or seeing showing up in your practice, and love to just talk about like how you're managing that, how it's helping or not helping, and all of that good stuff. Are you using much technology these days in your practice?
So like I mentioned, I am licensed through PsyPact in many states. And so I do a lot of telehealth, and AI, we have to embrace it. Like it's coming whether we want it or not. And so in our practice, particularly where I've seen it pop up is actually on the patient side, where patients will come to us after, they're like, well, it's time to actually talk to a real person because I've been talking to ChatGPT and having that be my therapist.
Yeah.
And then I've actually had patients bring in like printouts of like conversations they've had with ChatGPT and like the recommendations they've gotten, or fights that they've gotten into with significant others or family members and been like, I had ChatGPT analyze it all for me and this is what they've said. Or, my so-and-so is driving me nuts and I just can't figure out how to communicate with them. And I had ChatGPT do a psych profile on them. What do you think?
Yeah.
And that's always really interesting. I love it. I embrace it. I like to read it over and I kind of say, okay, not knowing this person, knowing that you probably put a little biased spin because you're mad at so-and-so about this. What are your thoughts? Like, let's unpack this a little bit. Like, let's see, your communication, we can't change them. We can work on figuring out like how we're relating to them and how they're affecting us. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that part of it's been really interesting. That's been a little bit of a curveball the last couple of years when people have come in and telling us, well, ChatGPT said this, my ChatGPT therapist said this. What do you think?
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I talked to a lot of, therapists, and some get very defensive or like offended that, their client might use ChatGPT instead of them. But it's the reality, especially if you don't have a concierge type service where you could just pop in and help whenever they need it. That does seem like that's the go-to for a lot of people these days. I've done it myself. Like, let me just see what ChatGPT says about this,
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think I use it in my personal life, more than I do my professional life. And part of it is just, it's coming. It's coming whether we, are ready for it or not. And so it's important to embrace it. Yeah. But I know that I myself would love some CEUs or trainings on how to optimize it probably for work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love hearing that you just embrace it when people come in with it because, everybody's doing it. It's like the standard now.
It's true. Even economically, we understand that our prices aren't necessarily achievable for a lot of people. And so if that helps them, if it allows them to like access some sort of help, it's important. It's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Do y'all, it doesn't sound like it, but have y'all thought about or looked into any of like virtual reality stuff for high performance, like athletes and that sort of thing? There's lots of like the simulations people are doing with virtual reality. I don't know if y'all have gotten into any of that stuff, but I keep hearing about it,
Yeah, I really haven't in my particular practice, but what I have done, especially if like somebody comes to me. So for example, if I work with an athlete who plays a sport that I don't know much about. Mm-hmm. Like I've learned a lot about golf since I've moved to Scottsdale in the last 4 years. And so I actually have like a D1 athlete who plays golf. Yeah. And so I will use, the virtual platforms to kind of give myself a refresher on what some of these words mean, like a birdie and a bogey and this and a that. And now I know what they mean. And I think that just helps me be a lot more relatable to my patient when they're telling me like, oh, I bogeyed on this and I was so upset and I should have birdied and I should have. And I'm like, yes.
You're like, I get it. I know what you're talking about.
I get it. Yeah. But in terms of other simulations and stuff, in my practice, I haven't really quite gotten there yet.
Yeah. It's just interesting. I keep seeing articles pop up about that virtual reality, especially with like OCD stuff or phobias, like systematic desensitization with like virtual reality headsets, like, slowly like putting yourself in situations that cause anxiety. So I just didn't know if y'all had explored that at all.
Not quite yet.
That's so cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time today to just kind of talk us through this. Is there anything you'd like anybody to take with them from this conversation if their therapist maybe looking into high performance individuals or this type of high performance psychology that you think might be helpful?
Yeah, I think it's really important just to sort of get as much continuing education on some of this stuff as possible. I was just really fortunate enough to walk into a situation where my continuing education person and the person who started a lot of this stuff is in the office next door to me.
It's
So
amazing.
I'm able to just run in and be like, hey, what do you think about this? And that consultation, that peer consultation has been really instrumental. And I encourage all therapists to kind of to use that, to utilize that, because I know sometimes in private practice, it can get pretty lonely. And I know even working virtually for 3 years, that's kind of what happened. And I was just sort of like, okay, now it's time for me to get back out in the real world and talk
Be
to
around
real life
people.
people instead of just behind a screen. And so, I've learned so much just even from my colleagues. And, I think networking and getting yourself out there, meeting other people, meeting other professionals, that's been really instrumental too in helping build my caseload.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time today. I think this is super interesting. I love what you're doing, and thanks for sharing it with the listeners.